Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to this information session for a world-class accelerator grant round at LaunchVic. My name's Kate Cornick and I'm the CEO of LaunchVic. As we always do, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we are meeting. For us, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And welcome to everyone who's joining us online. It's a real great pleasure to be announcing another grant round at LaunchVic. Before I get going, a little bit of housekeeping. I am going to be following the Q&A channel. Please do drop any questions you have as we go along or at the end into the channel, and I'll do my best to answer them. We have joining me today, Josh Lipscomb, we have Bronwyn Bitro and Georgia McDonald from the LaunchVic team, as well as Beck Pert, who will also be monitoring the chat channel. But please make sure that any questions go into Q&A because that's what I'm going to be following. So without further ado, we'll jump into this particular session. So the reason we're here today is really to help grow our startup ecosystem, but it's worth saying that we have been on a massive growth trajectory. I know some of you are very well known to us and have also been part of that trajectory. Our startup sector, our early stage startup sector valuation has doubled year on year for the past 2 years and is now worth more than $10 billion. We're expecting another big jump later this year when the Startup Genome announces the results. We've homed to more than 2,700 startups, a rapid growth from just a few years ago when we only knew of 800 or so. Our startup density is pushing up to 400 startups per million population. And to date, we have supported a whole host of programs, over 130, but 19 of those are accelerator programs. And they've supported more than 600 startups to scale on their journey. And many of those companies are going on to do really great things, which is truly exciting. And that's what we want to see more of. We want more wonderful startups being supported to grow, to go on and create jobs, create economic wealth and prosperity for Victoria, create new industries, and ultimately secure our future. Before I begin, I know lots of you are going to know the difference between startups and small businesses, but we might have people who are joining us for the first time. So I thought it was worth including this. LaunchVic is the Victorian government's startup agency. We're focused on startups. Small Business Victoria is focused on small businesses. And we really want to make sure this accelerator grant round focuses solely on startups. So an example that I frequently use is in accounting. If you are a high street accountant that is doing something novel, perhaps creating a new website, providing some digital services, but ultimately have a consultancy model to people in your neighborhood, you might be a fantastic small and medium enterprise, very important part of the Victorian economy, doing great things for community and your customers, but you're not a startup. The startup equivalent would be MYOB or Xero, who realized that they could innovate, put in place a tech platform, leverage innovation to ultimately access a global market. So whereas the consultancy model is limited by geography, the technology-based platform model means that these companies like MYOB and Xero can have customers from all over the world. These are the sorts of companies that we're interested in helping at LaunchVic. We define startups as innovative technology-based companies. They have global market potential, meaning they're not just focusing on the Australian market, they are going to export. And they're typically disruptive. They're typically looking at ways in which they can do things better, increase productivity, bring new products and services to market. But that's not always the case, but in general, they are quite disruptive companies. So if you're thinking about an accelerator program that's targeting small business, this is not the grant round for you. We're very strictly looking at technology-based companies that have got global potential, that are using innovation and are typically disrupting markets. So with that in mind, what we're ultimately looking for is world-class accelerator programs that are going to help our best and brightest startup scale. At LaunchVic, we have broken our model of accelerators into two. When we first started 4 years ago, everyone called their programs accelerators, but now we see pre-accelerators and accelerators. Pre-accelerators are organizations that are helping young companies get started and really getting them on that very first steps of a journey to creating a startup. An accelerator is helping startups scale. So this is helping them really secure product market fit, market share, and typically getting them ready for a Series A type capital investment. That's not always the case. We do have a number of bootstrap companies in Victoria, but we're really looking for accelerators that are going to help those companies scale. So if you're thinking about how you start and are encouraging entrepreneurs to be to start their business, this is not the grant round for you. We'll have more to say about opportunities in pre-accelerators into the future, but this is not a grant round. We are looking for world-class accelerators that can take startups that are already in existence and speed up their scaling trajectory. So just to reiterate, if you're a new application, you're thinking about how you can help people start a startup, this is not the accelerator round for you. We're really focused on accelerators that are going to help companies scale. We're looking for groups that can be delivered in Melbourne and help contribute to the growth of our ecosystem across Victoria. The reason we want this to be in Melbourne is because we know we have enough density of scaling startups that are eligible for accelerator programs located in Melbourne CBD. We follow our regions very closely. We have some wonderful regional partners that we absolutely love, are doing stellar work, but they don't yet have the scale to generate companies with enough scaling potential to go through an accelerator program. They're more focused on pre-accelerators, and indeed that's what we support across regional Victoria. So we are looking for someone to be located in Melbourne. Doesn't have to be in the CBD, but it does need to be centralised where anyone across the state can gain access to that program. So that might be programs, they might have people coming in and commuting from the regions. We might allow people to do online programs, but we certainly know the importance of bringing people together. The world's opened up after COVID. We've seen a number of accelerators move online. We do want to make sure that while you can deliver potentially in a hybrid approach, that you are able to convene people at a centralized place, and it makes sense that that's in Melbourne. We're very happy for the accelerators to be sector agnostic, and that tends to be what we've funded to date. But we also see some really strong sectors coming through. So we would be delighted to receive sector-specific accelerators, for example, in fintech. We have supported, for example, accelerators in medtech as well as in sports tech. We do see other sectors have got enough density to warrant a dedicated accelerator. So we, as part of your application, if you are sector specific, we want to know that you have got your finger on your pulse. You understand the depth of quality that's coming through that sector. You have access to the types of startups that are eligible to scale in that sector. And so prove to us that you've got that sector specific expertise and access to networks to help startups scale. Equally, if you're sector agnostic, we want to know that you are deeply engaged in the Victorian startup ecosystem. You know how you're going to access customers who are going to participate in your programs and help them scale. LaunchVic will fund up to $2 million per application over 3 years. We love to see match funding and leverage from the private sector. It's certainly something that we will be treating very favourably through this grant round. In terms of accelerator models, we know there are a huge variety of models, and we've seen a lot come through LaunchVic. We're not necessarily looking for your cookie cutter accelerator. We recognize that there are people that do a fantastic job of 12-week cohort-based programs, and there are some really stellar programs. We also recognize there are some really great studio type models coming through the ranks. There are some really great incubator always open for applications. So just because we've called this a world-class accelerator grant round doesn't mean that we want a cookie cutter approach. We really are very open to novel models. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is take great Victorian startups and support them on their scaling journey. So just to reiterate, if you're helping startups start from scratch, this isn't the grant round for you. We really are looking to help startups scale. The other thing I'll say on models is we see all sorts of models come through LaunchVic, and we recognize that sustainability can be really challenging in the accelerator model. We're very open to for-profit and not-for-profit. We know that some accelerators take equity, some accelerators don't take equity. We're pretty agnostic there. The only time that we will have a discussion around equity is when we see accelerators taking an unfair amount. equity and that's not commensurate with the amount of effort that's going in. So we don't want to see people being overly greedy. We want to be founder friendly. We want to make sure our programs are really working for the founders. That's really ultimately what we want to achieve. However, one other thing we will add is that if we are looking at for-profit models, LaunchVic doesn't necessarily always grant funding. We also will take investment. So there are a number of accelerators where we have invested versus granting to give the accelerators the money so that they can execute, but also making sure that we're getting a share of the profits if and when those startups create a fantastic exit that creates a return on investment. And the reason we do that is that we can give back to the sector. So we are custodians of taxpayers' money. We want to create as much benefit of that money as we possibly can. So it will be a real windfall if we do end up having a return on investment that we can then reinvest back into the sector and support new programs to come to life. So I can see there's a few questions coming through. I might just nut off a couple of them while we're going through. I know some I'm going to address as I come forward. There's a question from Dave about, aside from fintech, what other sectors are of particular importance and interest? Dave, we probably want to hear from you about what you think are areas of interest and importance, because it's really, to us, very important that the people that are running the accelerator really truly understand the sector. So if I turn around and said construction tech is something that we might be interested in, we want to know that there are construction tech experts behind that accelerator. It's not something that I've just said on this call, and hopefully we won't get a flood of construction tech accelerators. It is an area where there certainly is a bit of activity, but it's not one of the strong points. If you're interested in understanding the depth of sector expertise, go to our database, Finding Startups at .launchvic.org, which has got the full database of LaunchVic's 2,700 startups. You can see how many startups there are in different stages, what sectors are really doing incredibly well versus others. But if you are looking at a specific sector, we definitely want to see that expertise coming through. Really important that if you are, for example, doing a construction tech accelerator, that you have got expertise and networks and access to the construction industry. Just to reiterate, we are not looking specifically for a construction tech accelerator. I'm also going to answer a question from Cyril about what defines the shift from pre-accelerator to accelerator. And it's a great question. And this is something that we've seen over time. When we first started LaunchVic, everybody called themselves accelerators. Pre-accelerators were really, it wasn't really a term that was used, but we recognize that there's this full spectrum of supports and programs that help startups scale. Pre-accelerators are organizations that are helping people in their very, very early stages of startup journey. So they might have a kernel of an idea. They might have just started listed an ABN or got an ABN, but they really don't have a solid business plan. They don't necessarily have any product whatsoever. They might not have even tested their idea. So that's what a pre-accelerator is focused on. An accelerator is focused on helping companies scale. So these are companies that have very often been in market for a couple of years. They might have one or two people that they've been testing with. They might have had to do some research and some work in a laboratory to really hone an idea. They might have had to discover how they build product, but they have certainly spent a lot of time and energy thinking about that product. And now it is about the time that they are thinking about how they get market share, how they scale, how they get revenue. Now, there is a bit horses for courses, because some different types of startups will be different points of their journey, depending on the sector they work in. For example, we know that medical startups often have a much longer and slower start to life than, say, a software as a service company, because they have to go through clinical trials, or they might have to get go through some regulatory hurdles with the TGA, whatever it might be. So the difference between a pre-accelerator is helping startups start, and accelerator is helping startups grow at its most simplest form. We are focused on accelerators, not pre-accelerators. So this is really about helping our cohort scale. All right, I am going to keep moving and come to a few other questions as we go along the way. So who's eligible? We are very happy to accept an established startup accelerator program, either local or international, or someone who's entirely new, but has key personnel who have a proven track record of working in and around the startup sector. So that might be someone who has led or worked in an accelerator and really understands how they work. It might be a startup that's founder that has left their startup and has been through an accelerator and has that experience and understands what it's like to grow. It might be someone who is a very deep mentor in the startup sector that has a profound amount of mentoring experience and really understands the journey. But you have to have experience. If you haven't worked with startups, this is not the place for you. So if you've worked with small businesses and you're thinking about getting into startups, this is not the right program for you. We're really looking for people who have deep expertise. As I keep reiterating, this program is about helping establish startup scale, not creating new startups. And I've spoken about the difference between pre-accelerators and accelerators. One other thing I'll add on eligibility is we're not looking to refund programs that LaunchVic has already funded. We do have alternative paths where if you are a LaunchVic funded accelerator and you're doing a really great job, we certainly have refunding opportunities. We approach you with those opportunities. If you have not been approached, again, this probably isn't the right round for you unless you're doing something radically different from your existing accelerator program. So we're not looking to refund existing programs through this. We're looking to fund new programs. We ultimately want to create more spaces in market each year for startups. As our ecosystem grows, there's more startups that are looking for support, and this program is about bringing that support to market. So this is not about refunding existing programs. So key assessment criteria, what are we looking for? The first thing is experience. We want to know that you have got accelerator experience. I just spoke to that. We want to know that you've had experience running an accelerator, working an accelerator, leading a startup, mentoring startups, whatever it might be, but demonstrating to us that you have expertise is really important. And of course, the key part of that is the key personnel. We want to know who's going to run this thing. We definitely want to understand their capabilities. If you're an international accelerator that's looking to come to Melbourne, we want to know who the people are on the ground in Melbourne who are going to run this. We've learned from experience that if we bring international accelerators out, the importance of having great local people on the ground who can really activate the accelerator. It's those local networks and connections that are so important. Same if you're interstate. If you're dialing in from New South Wales, that's fabulous. We'd love to see some accelerators move to Melbourne, but we want to know that you've got people on the ground who can really kick the program off, engage deeply in the community and know what they're doing. So that is really important to us. The next part is tell us about the program. We want to know the type of program you're going to offer. As I said, we're not looking for a cookie cutter 12-week, 10 startup cohort. We are very open to ideas and being creative. Anything from typical accelerators is great if that's your model, through to incubators, through to studio style. We're very open to the full gamut, but ultimately we're looking for multi-week support for startups that is going to have, and typically it's 3 to 6 months, some are longer, but we're looking for programs that are going to really help startups scale. This is not a 1 week hit in a workshop weekend. We're really looking for a depth and length of programming that's really going to help these startups scale. Again, the methodology, mentoring, you can be entirely mentorship based, it can be entirely curriculum based, it can be online. We definitely see the importance of bringing cohorts together and creating physical connections between the cohorts as well as into the ecosystem, whether it's venture capitalists, mentors, etc. That's why we're saying this needs to be run in Melbourne so that we can open it up to the whole of Victoria. But we're very open to different methodologies. So please be creative. Outcomes, we want to know what your measures of success will be. In particular, how many startups are you going to be accelerating per batch? A batch might be a cohort, a batch might be a year in an incubator type system, but it's very important to us to know how many companies you're going to be supporting. A typical accelerator will be supporting somewhere between 10 to 20 companies a year, and we certainly would see less than 10 as being unfavorable. So we want we're looking for quite high throughput. We also want to know what else you're going to do to help grow the ecosystem. We know our best accelerators are deeply engaged community leaders that are really accelerating the ecosystem, connecting the ecosystem, and do far more than just offer a 12-week program. They're integral parts of our community. And so if you're a new program coming to Victoria, we need to know that you're going to be an integral part of our community. On the organization and operations, there's a few things we want to know. We want to understand your organizational chart. How do you report? Do you have a board? Who are your mentors and advisors, etc. We definitely want to know about funding. As I said, we definitely love seeing matching cash contributions. In-kind contributions, yes, but cash definitely is favorable. So we would strongly encourage you to look at partner organizations, etc., that can help build capability in your financing of the program. As I say, we'll provide up to 2 million, but if you can bring more to the table, that is extremely favorable. If you do bring something to the table, we definitely need to see letters of support. We'll ask for a budget, and this is one that I always pause when we're doing these things. It's amazing how many people put in wonderful applications, and I think I've seen over 2,000 of these since I've been at LaunchVic, put in fantastic applications with budgets that don't add up. And that worries us slightly because we want to know that you are helping companies scale, and a big part of that is making sure their finances are right. And if you've got a problem with your budget, it makes us wonder whether you have got the depth of expertise. So please make sure you put some time into budget, make sure it adds, make sure it's pretty straightforward, make sure that it's really crystal clear, and don't just rush through that section. It does matter. The other section that matters is sustainability. We want to know what your plans are. We do recognize it's hard to be sustainable as an accelerator program without grants, but we also want you to be thinking about it. We don't just want you to come in and turn around and expect that LaunchVic's going to refund you in 2 to 3 years. Give it some thought. How are you going to get to sustainability? If you're a not-for-profit, what are the opportunities? Is it about consulting? Is it potentially about taking some equity via a foundation that can then feed back into your organization for sustainability? If you are for-profit, is it an equity model? Is there some sort of management carry fee? Have you got a fund associated with the work that you're doing, etc.? So sustainability is really important. There's a lot of information in that. Diversity and inclusion is critically important to LaunchVic, and we definitely want to know how your program is going to encourage diversity and inclusion. And that, as we know, means across the entire pipeline of attracting people to attend your events and apply for your program, through to making sure that mentors and educators that are part of the program, there's diversity and inclusion. Recruitment of participants is really important. As I said before, we want to understand that you've got deep networks into the community. We're not going to be here helping you fill your places. We want to know that you are going to be able to do that. So understanding how you're going to recruit is really important. And often that is about pounding the pavement. What pavement have you pounded? What networks and connections can you leverage to get people into your program? The final thing we ask for is a pitch deck. And again, it is amazing how many accelerator programs can't provide a pitch deck, yet this is a key outcome of accelerators, is often a pitch day. So make sure you put as much effort into your pitch deck as you require your startups to put in on pitch days, or at least if you're a new accelerator, when you've been to a pitch day and you've seen high quality pitches, make sure your program is a really high quality pitch. That is really important. So I'm going to throw open for Q&A. We've got a few up here on the screen that are ones that we commonly get, but I note there's a fair few coming in on the line. So I'm going to nut through the 17 that I can see in front of me. Holy moly, we'll see how we go. I'm going to start at the top and work my way through. So first of all, Emily, thank you for your patience. Emily's asked, she's curious, does this open to a startup group situated in a university? Yeah, absolutely. We funded a number of university accelerators in our time. So long as you meet all the requirements of what we have been through today, there's no reason we wouldn't support a university accelerator program. What we would say is we'd be looking for expertise. We're looking for scaling startups. So we want to know that you've got a pipeline. If you're looking at your university as the potential pipeline, it's not a pre-accelerator. This is not helping students start a startup. This is helping them scale. So you need to do the work to make sure you can meet all the requirements, but we certainly wouldn't, we would welcome applications from universities. Archie has asked how we define scaling, post-product market fit, revenues, users. You tell us, Archie. It really depends on the cohort that you're looking at. If you are talking about a med tech company, it might not yet be post-product. It might still be going through clinical trials. If you're a SaaS company, it might well be on revenue and users. that what we're looking for companies that are really going on that upward trajectory, have a product. So again, going back to pre-accelerators versus accelerators, this is not helping people start companies, it's helping people scale companies. And different companies will have different growth metrics. So what type of companies are you going to target and what are their growth metrics? And that might vary within a cohort. It might be really quite consistent in a cohort, depending on whether you are sector agnostic or sector specific, whether you have a particular type of company that you're looking for. So it can vary, but we're definitely not looking at helping people start startups. We have a question about, does the Accelerator grant application need to be a registered Victorian company? No, you don't. We welcome international and interstate, but you do have to set up an office in Melbourne. So you don't have to have one already, but you have to be prepared to set one up. And we want to make sure that there are people on the ground in Victoria who are active in your program. We know it's really important that people are pounding the pavement. So we definitely welcome interstate and international applications. Ari's asked, do accelerators have to be technology product accelerators? So this really goes, I think, to the definition of a startup. So as I said at the beginning, a startup is a technology-based company that's using innovation, typically disruptive, accessing or targeting global markets. So we definitely see that, you know, within that product and services are the key areas that we look at. We're certainly not looking at small business accelerators that might be focused on, for example, restaurants, consulting models, and other things that are often geographically constrained. So hopefully that answers that question for you, Ari. There's another question from a fan. Any specific global markets for scale-ups that you are focusing on? Can we look at a few scale-up accelerator programs targeting emerging markets? We're very open to any applications that come forward. What we would say is it's critically important that you've got the expertise in your team. So if you have got experience in running an accelerator or have key personnel that are experienced in running accelerator, we're very interested in that. If you're looking to shop around and bring someone in globally, but you yourself haven't got experience, we want to know who those key personnel who have got experience. So I think that is a really important one. So Deakin Universities have put a question in about ManuFutures, Geelong based. Are we eligible? We certainly see that there is eligibility, but we want to know that you can make it accessible from Melbourne. So we recognise that Geelong, there's a lot of exciting things going on around manufacturing. Again, our definition of a startup is not a small business. So we're not looking at small and medium enterprise. You need to prove to us that you're working with startups. And we want to know that this is accessible across the state. So Melbourne is where we do expect activity to happen, but certainly if you can meet those requirements, then you can be eligible. We have a question from Dave. Would only physical startups located in Vic qualify to participate in these programs? What about a mix of interstate and global startups targeting entry to Victoria? This is a really good question, Dave. We're actually the state government agency responsible for growing our local ecosystem. So we do put targets on the amount of Victorian startups that go through, but we also recognise there's a benefit of bringing startups from interstate or international. So we typically would require at least 75% of startups that go through your program to be Victorian, leaving a space for interstate and international, but that's not part of what we are, our mandate and how we're measured by government. What we also find is in scale-up accelerators, the companies are still very young and small, so they're not necessarily ready to move around the world, and it's not a great talent attraction, investment attraction mechanism. This program is really dedicated to growing local startups and helping build our local industry. So while we will typically accept 75%, it is negotiable on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes we require more than 70%, sometimes we will go less. But ultimately, this program is designed to help our local industry grow. So it's really important you give priority to that. We have a question that there are already a few dollars in the agtech area. Is there an opportunity to support an agtech program to complete the pipeline? There is definitely, and we are sector agnostic. What we want to know is that there's sufficient pipeline coming through. So we would encourage you to do your homework and demonstrate that there is a strong pipeline of agtech startups of the right stage that can scale. Part of the reason we've done a big push in pre-accelerators in agtech is because we did recognize that there was a pipeline problem. But if you can prove to us that you've got access to networks and connections to help fill an accelerator program and you have a model to help them scale, we're definitely interested in that area. So we wouldn't say no to an agtech accelerator, and we certainly see with the work that we're doing in pre-accelerators that there will be more agtech startups coming to market in the future. So be very interested to know how you fit in with those pre-accelerator programs if that's the case. We've got a question about whether we are focused on scaling for growth within Australia or global markets. As I said, we define a startup as a company that is targeting global markets. So we are very much interested in global markets, but we also recognize that a lot of young companies need to prove themselves on their doorstep. So accelerators might be pushing them to target global markets, but focus local first. So again, it's not one or the other, but again, it depends on the design of your program. We have a question about the investment model for for-profit program. Do you invest in the accelerator itself or in the fund that will hold equity? We'll negotiate case-by-case basis, and we're very open. We've actually done both previously, so that's something that really depends on the program and the preference. Ultimately, we want you to be successful as an accelerator, and it's making sure that we have a windfall that we can feed back into the sector if you are successful. We also, a sub-question there is, can we give part of the grant to the participant as a cash investment in addition to the service? Absolutely. We've done that before. So we're very open to that sort of a model. That will also help influence the amount of investment that we take if that's the model that you put forward. We've got a question about from Samir. Their model is 3-stage Ignite Bootcamp Scale-Up. They're applying to support the Scale-Up Accelerator program. As I've said, we are not looking to support people to start startups. We're helping them grow startups. So please focus on that end of the market. So again, there's also a question I think in here within a bootcamp. We're not looking to support bootcamps. We are looking to support programs that minimum, I would say, you know, we are flexible, but all of our programs are typically minimum of 12 weeks, if not longer. So we're really looking for long programs that are going to help startups scale. We have a question on to clarify the definition of a scale-up. So we're really talking about startups here. The scale-up definition, there's many definitions that are thrown around. We would typically say a scale-up is post-Series A, and we're really talking about pre-Series A companies. We're getting companies ready to scale. So they're not starting, they've been around, they know what they're doing, they do understand who their market is. We're helping them then scale and achieve that market potential that they've got. So we're not looking at a scale-up accelerator per se, by the definition that we use, which would be a post-Series A, typically 10 to 30% growth year on year in market. Yeah, we are open, and it ultimately depends on the sector that you're looking at. So there is some variation there. Is there a specific number of startups per cohort? No, up to you, but we're certainly looking to help a number of companies. So we would not look favorably on less than 10 per cohort. But that doesn't mean to say that we haven't funded less than 10 before. We absolutely have, where we've seen really great accelerator programs come forward. Equally, we are looking for quantity over quality. So don't think that by putting in a cohort of 100, you're going to get through. We want to see the balance of the program that you're doing with the quality of services being in the right mix. We have a question from Max about should the budgeting be balanced in terms of administrative costs and funding for startup programs? ultimately, we will leave that up to you. We do need to make sure the budget balances. It depends how much you're getting from elsewhere. We have funded companies where we fund 100% of the operations. We've funded companies where we are funding a portion of the operations along with a cash component to the startups. Really up to you how you manage that. Is there a minimum level of funding? No, Tony, and we're always very excited to see applications that are really well thought through and come in under the 2 million. That's far more exciting when you're reading through applications than seeing an application that comes through with 2 million and is really not very well thought out. So again, that goes to putting time into your budget. But we certainly, if your program is well thought through and comes in at much lower cost, we will fund that. And in fact, one of our top accelerator programs has been one of our cheapest accelerator programs for a number of years. And we say top, not because they're cheap, we say top because they're producing more scaling startups, more jobs, more capital raised than any other startup that we've funded. How do we look at cash contributions from revenue? Ultimately, it's part of a budget, and we would expect you to be able to account for both in a budget. Next question is, does this mean that all 19 programs previously funded by LaunchVic cannot apply? Unless you are doing something different, then yes, we don't want to see your application come forward. So this is, if you're planning on applying just to get refunding for your existing program, this is not the grant round for you. If you did something over here and now you're looking to do something radically different over here, perhaps you were sector agnostic and now you're going to go sector specific and you're going to target double the number of startups that you did previously, we would be really open to that. But if you are already funded, we certainly, for the accelerators that are doing unbelievably well, we're tapping you on the shoulder already and having conversations about how we can refund you. So we do willingly and frequently support those companies that are doing a really stellar job in the community. In the last year, I know we've refunded MedTech Actuator, we've refunded StartMate, we've refunded Springboard, and others. So if you are doing a great job, we will talk to you separately about refunding. Dave's asked a question about scaling up overseas. Could the program also include helping Victorian startups scale through overseas market entry? Yes, absolutely. We would be very interested in that. But as I say, it is about making sure that we're helping these companies grow. And we've certainly supported other accelerators take founders, for example, to Silicon Valley as part of their education process. And, introductions to venture capital, that can be a really good thing. We are looking at supporting the local industry. So we're not looking to see startups flip to accelerators overseas or move headquarters. That's not what we're trying to do. So it's getting the balance right. Nick has asked, would we only fund the operating cost of the program, or would you fund an investment too? We would definitely look at funding an investment, and indeed we have in the past. Can we apply for an accelerator program that already exists? 2 cohorts completed and a completely new separate program that's about to start that helps startups scale globally. If we haven't funded you, then you are certainly eligible, but we want to see that it's something very different and you're bringing something to market that wouldn't happen otherwise. So if you're already in market and you haven't had Victorian government support, why do you suddenly need support from LaunchVic for this model? Is it that you're going to double the number of startups going through your program? Is it that you're looking to do something really unique? So we want to know that there's something different. There's, we are custodians of taxpayers' money, and we need to make sure we put that to best possible use. So I think in that particular example, you want to show that there is going to be a step change from what's happening now. We are looking to support more startups than we are than we are already in market. And if you're already functioning in market, that's fantastic. But we're not going to fund you to keep doing the status quo. It needs to be something quite radically different. Next question from Tony. We're a business looking to scale our sports technology into national and Asian markets. Are we eligible? I'm afraid, Tony, you're not eligible because we're looking for programs that are going to help companies like you. What I would say as a sports tech, I would look at Startup Bootcamp and reach out to them, or the Australian Sports Technology Network, or Techstars. All three of those accelerators are supporting companies like yours. They're all got information on our website, launchvic.org. Just to reiterate, that Startup Bootcamp, Techstars, and ASTN. We have a question from Sunir. Can product engineering consultation costs be covered? Can we create vouchers that will pay for the startups to establish their supply chain, get manufacturing and automated consultation? Potentially, yes. We haven't done that in the past, but we're not opposed to it. But we do want to see startups. So that's just we do often see companies come forward with voucher screens for manufacturing that are more SME based. So please make sure that you are focused on startups if that's the case. David has very kindly offered to help people out in their program. Thank you, David. I'll leave that to you. For funneling startups into your program. So thank you for that, David. Johnny's asked what's the total funding we're providing. We will provide up to 2 million per application, and it ultimately depends on the number of quality applications. We're hoping to get at least one good application through, but we could get more, and we'd be very happy to fund more if there is really high quality. And the very last question is from Dave. Where can we find a list or landscape map of the existing accelerator programs in Melbourne? We include on our website a list of all the ones that we fund. There are some others, and if you do some Googling, you'll find them quite easily. They include And Health, fabulous program, as well as several others. Many of them have received funding through LaunchVic, but not as an accelerator program. But our website's probably the best place to look for that in the time being. Got a question. Are we still eligible for this round of funding for a new accelerator program if LaunchVic's already funded one of our pre-accelerator programs? Yes, if you are doing an accelerator, not a pre-accelerator, that is something that's different, but we certainly want to know that you've got the experience around acceleration. So if it's different from what you're already doing, that is definitely something that we'd be interested in. Nick has asked if we can have Dave's emails, and I think someone's very kindly going to answer that live. My goodness, what a lot of questions. I don't think we've ever had so many questions in an information session. I will stay online for a couple more minutes. If anyone feels that there's anything that we haven't covered, please put through a question. I'm more than happy to keep answering them. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining this session. I hope you found it informative, and we very much look forward to receiving your applications. Thank you for your time. I'll just wait online for a minute or two before we close it out, just in case there are any last questions. Irfan's just asked, can we connect with our team? And that is actually a great question, and one that I should have put up. It is our last question on the page here. The answer is no. And the reason we do that is to make sure everyone's treated fairly. However, if you want to write a question, you can write to grants@launchvic.org, and we will respond in writing to your question. We then put those questions up on the FAQ channel, which is on the link from the homepage. If you follow the links through this Accelerator Grant Fund, you'll see the FAQs, and we update that regularly. And that means everybody has access to the same information. It means everyone's treated fairly, and we're not coaching anyone in putting in an application. So please feel free to put in any questions on email. What's the preferred period of contract and number of cohorts you'd like to fund? As I said, we're looking for 2 million up to 3 years. That's in the guidelines. In terms of the number of cohorts, I assume that means the number of people we'll fund. We're hoping to fund at least one high quality accelerator, but we can certainly fund more if more high quality applications come in. We have a question about whether there are templates to prepare grant applications. Have a look at Smarty Grants. It's pretty templated. You just have to fill out your answers. And so please jump on the system. You can go into Smarty Grants. If you follow the links from our website, you can go in and start filling out an application already. You don't have to submit it until you're ready. When will you get back to participants on application success? Great question. 27th of June is when applications are due in. 12th of July is when we'll do an initial shortlist. So for those that are successful, they will be invited into a pitch day. The pitch day is happening on the 1st of August. For those that are unsuccessful, they will be informed shortly after the 12th of July. The pitch day will include a selection of startups, not all accelerators, not all of which will get funded. The ones that will ultimately get funded will be announced in September. All righty. I will just, I can see we've got one more coming online. Cohorts for these accelerators are only pre-A startups and must have products and services. Okay, so it really depends, as I've said before, on the type of startup you're supporting. If you are supporting a medtech company, they may not have a product or market in service in market and be at a stage where they need acceleration help. If they are a SaaS company, they might well have product and market in service. So it really depends on where you're applying. And but what we're not looking is helping startups get started. So we're looking at the existing cohort of startups, helping them scale. We're looking at companies that are probably pre-venture and they're looking to get to the point that want to get their first institutional investor. Once they've got institutional investors, those investors, a good institutional investor will help them scale further. So we're really about getting them into that funnel. But it's not something that you can clearly define and say our cohorts must always be pre-Series A without a revenue in market with this particular stage, because it does vary from startup to startup. What we want you to show us is how well you understand the target market you're talking about, and define what your eligible startup will be. The very clear thing that we're going to say no to is companies that you're looking to start a startup. We're not looking at starting a startup. We're looking at helping people grow a startup that have already started. Irfan's asked 2 million, 3 years ex GST. Correct. Of course, you can go less. We can happily accept an application for 1 million over 3 years. Equally, we might accept a stellar application that's 2 years over a shorter time frame with a really strong sustainability plan. Archie's after we can start earlier. It does, I'm afraid you have to start after you've been awarded the funding. We don't fund anyone retrospectively, so you do have to start after we've announced you, which will be around September time. Can the pitch be delivered from overseas? Absolutely. We do have a set time because it coincides with one of our board meetings. So it might be an unsuitable hour of the night, but if you're prepared to do that, then that's absolutely fine. We just don't have a huge amount of flexibility because of the assessment panel includes a number of board members whose diaries can be quite difficult to get into. So if you don't mind doing something at 3 a.m. in the morning, depending on where you are in the world, we are very happy for you to pitch online. Fantastic. I think that is it. So thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate you attending, and we look forward to seeing your applications. And with that, we will close.